Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Vladimir Putin is hosting the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum between the 18th and 21st of June. Amid plunging foreign direct investment, heavy sanctions and soaring defense spending, Putin's demand to avoid recession, quote, under any circumstances, signals deep concern within the Kremlin. With Western investors absent and domestic pressures mounting, we explore what this economic crossroads means for Russia's political strategy and global alignment. To share his analysis, we're joined by Filip Rudnik. He's a research fellow at the Center for Eastern Studies. Filip, hello and welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, before we kick off, there's a short soundbite that I'd like to share with our audience, and then I'll get your take on it.
According to the figures, there is cooling, but all our figures are in the rear-view mirror. According to the current business environment and indicators, I think we are already on the verge of sliding into recession.
As economy minister, you should say something optimistic. Otherwise, it will appear on the internet immediately that Reshetnikov predicted that we would fall into recession.
I didn't predict it, I said that we are on the verge. Then everything depends on our decisions.
Oh dear. I wonder how long he's going to stay economics minister. What do you make of that, Filip?
Well, I'm glad that you brought this up, actually, because I think that despite the fact that all the spotlight of this economic forum was, as always, concentrated on Vladimir Putin and his presence, this particular clip from this macroeconomic session, joined by the head of the central bank, the Ministry of Economy, and the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Economic Development, it all shows that there are some cracks within the current, I would say, economic system of Russian Federation, that despite all this chants and all the slogans that are being shared, for instance, by Vladimir Putin himself, the guys who are, playing a central role in rolling, or more like leading this machine, they are pretty well aware that the current trajectory of the economic development of Russia has already been brought down and slowing down, which is particularly seen on this, which was particularly visible on during this specific session. That, for instance, those three guys that are participating in that, one lady and two fellow gentlemen, they are all want something different from the system. They are all seeking for some certain different things from the elite, from the regime, to bring into the economy. For instance, the Ministry of Economic Development, who was being particularly visible on that scene, he didn't predict, but he said that they are on the verge of the recession. He seeks to have more investment from the systemic, from the budget, while the co-participant of this session, so the head of the central bank, she seeks to cool down the economy in order to proclaim that they are victorious in the fight with the recession, with the inflation. So you could see that there are contradictory needs, contradictory missions within the economic bloc of the Putin's regime.
Well, I mean, that's not unusual, having opposing opinions on how to deal with the economy. But the thing is that, Putin has warned very strongly against slipping into recession. And therefore, presumably, the head of the National Bank is going to do her level best to cool down the economy. Now, tell me, lay out for us very briefly, if you would, Filip, the main causes of this shrinkage in the economy.
Well, that's not even my term. That was a term coined by. That was a name. There was a term coined by other representatives of the Russian elite, that they are saying that the Russian economy is in the state of the perfect storm, and this perfect storm consists of maybe 3 or 4 elements. Namely, first one is the strengthening the ruble. That because of the strengthening of the ruble, they are not so competitive in terms of the exports, while the imports are far more expensive.
But where would they export to anyway? I mean, they're under such heavy sanctions at the moment. Even those choices are limited, aren't they?
Yes, of course, but that's another strain. That's another pressure that they are experiencing. I mean, when I'm saying about the Russian exports, I mean mostly hydrocarbons, of course, which leads me to the second element of this perfect storm situation, which is the plummeting price of the oil itself. Of course, right now the situation has been mitigated somehow. I mean, currently, that's a matter of the last few days with the whole Iran and Israel conflict, that we could see the spike in oil prices. But since April and even since January, the situation in oil market was not so favorable for Russian economy, that they started to sell oil below the price of below the price with which they can balance the budget, given the
what price do they want, Filip?
Macroeconomic factors.
What price do they need it to be to balance the budget?
Currently, it is estimated that they need to balance it at $60 per barrel. Right now, the global price of Brent oil, so the Western benchmark of oil, is currently, if I'm not mistaken, 76. But we need to be aware of the fact that the Russian oil, given the sanctions regime, is sold at a discount. And this discount, I mean, it depends on the time and it depends on the sanctions enforcement. But the discount is estimated to be around $10, $11, $12 per barrel. So right now, given the recent spike due to the Iran and Israel conflict, they started to sell their oil above the budget price. But that's a political premium that we encounter right now at the market, and it depends on how the situation would evolve in the future.
Right.
Okay. So below once again.
Okay. So economically speaking, things are pretty precarious. How does that translate into the internal politics of Russia? Is it sustainable for Putin? Because or is some voice inside the Kremlin going to say, sorry, this is simply not good enough. We've lost 1 million people in this war already. Our economy is going down the drain. Putin, you're going to have to go. Do you see that happening?
Well, certainly not him going away, but certainly I think there would be some people being pressured to go with the flow and to do as it is said by Putin himself. Let me just remind you that, for instance, Elvira Nabiullina, so the head of the central bank, she's already said for multiple times that the resources of Russia Federation, given the current situation, given the sanctions regime, given the war, attrition, and so on and so forth, the resources of Russia is spread very thin, right? So they do not have that much as they used to, and it's getting more challenging in pushing forward. And what you said about the labor force, that some resources are being relocated into the military sector, it damages, it impacts certainly the civilian sector. That, for instance, the head of the central bank, she said it multiple times that, for instance, the rate of unemployment, for instance, is not a matter of it's not like a sign of the success of the economy. It's a sign of the fact that they do not have labor force as a free reserve, because some people are going to the army or being employed by the military sector. Therefore, the economy in its civilian sphere cannot develop on a normal pace, on a normal trajectory. So if I could prognose anything in terms of how would the system go on despite the economic obstacles, I would say that Putin and the ruling elite has a clearly envisaged goal, which is to win the war with Ukraine. And if anyone opposes that goal, justifying a disobey by saying that some macroeconomic indicators are not all right, they would simply be forced to resign. And there are some rumors about the ongoing conflict between Nabulina, so between the central bank, and people within the current elite. So perhaps there will be more apparent cracks within the system, but I would not. It's hard to assess when and whether it will eventually happen.
Understood. Now, in the last minute or so that we have left, Filip, as we touched on earlier, there are a limited number of markets where Russia can sell its hydrocarbons. I mean, China and India, of course, are top of that list. But that gives both of those countries quite a lot of leverage, does it not, over Russia? So how can that be used by those countries, and what is the potential impact on Russia's economic and political structure if they do that?
No, you're perfectly correct in that statement. What I mentioned earlier, that discount on Russian oil is particularly connected to the fact that Russia can sell its oil predominantly to 2 or 3 key importers, which are China, India, and Turkey to a lesser extent. But in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, the 90% of Russian oil exports were transported to those 2 first countries, namely China and India. And that is why it gives them, a bargaining leverage, a bargaining position in negotiating the terms of the delivery and the price itself. Therefore, Russia sells its oil, which is, for them, it constitutes line for their economy, but nevertheless they have to sell it with a discount, because their field for maneuver is quite limited.
Right.
Therefore they sell it for a lower price.
Understood. Filip Rudnik, thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for taking the time to join us. Have a good evening. Brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away though, lots more coming up. Goodbye.